Hello everyone, today our topic is marketing research. Learning objectives include identifying the reason for conducting marketing research, looking at the 5-step marketing research approach, and explaining how marketing uses secondary and primary data. In addition to looking at uses of observations, questionnaires, panels, experiments, and other data collection methods, explaining how data analytics, data mining, and predictive modeling lead to marketing actions, and describing 3 approaches to developing a company's sales forecast. So as we look at how Hollywood uses marketing research, in terms of the film industry, they do movie title testing to see what movie titles might be accepted by audiences. They use concept testing and script assessment, test screening, they do tracking studies, and also social listening. So what is marketing research? The definition of marketing research is the process of defining a marketing problem and opportunity, systematically collecting and analyzing information, and recommending actions. So the challenges in doing good marketing research include a 5-step marketing research approach. First is a decision, a conscious choice among alternatives, and then looking at decision making, which is more a structured approach. So the 5-step marketing research approach leading to marketing actions is shown here. First, step number 1 is defining the problem. First, you have to realize that there is an issue that needs to be solved, and you look at setting research objectives and identifying possible marketing actions. The second is to develop a research plan, where you specify constraints, identify data needed for marketing actions, and determine how to collect the data. Next would be collecting relevant information, obtaining secondary or primary data, and we'll look at the differences between the two. Step 4 is develop findings, analyzing the data that's been collected, and then presenting the findings based on the data collected. And then step 5 is take marketing actions, where you'd be making action recommendations, and then implementing action recommendations, and then overall evaluating results. So in defining the problem, first you need to realize that there is perhaps an issue or a problem that needs to be solved. With that, then you would set research objectives in terms of what research may need to be done and how. You need to have a clear research purpose and identify possible marketing action to go along with that. So some measures of success, again, which is defined as criteria or standards used in evaluating proposed solutions to the problem. For example, with looking at Lego, one would be playtime, children spending more time playing with a new design. Possible marketing actions could be to introduce a new design or drop an old design. Constraints, which are, in a decision, the restrictions placed on potential solutions to a problem. So we look at identifying data needed for marketing actions. You'd identify data that needs to be collected and determine how to collect that data, looking at concepts or methods. Concepts are ideas about products, and methods are approaches to collect data. Step 3 is collecting relevant information, and here you need to decide, okay, how are you going to do that? In terms of data, it's defined as the facts and figures related to the project that are divided into 2 main parts: secondary data and primary data. Secondary data is defined as data that are the facts and figures that have already been recorded prior to the project at hand, whereas primary data is data that are facts and figures that are newly collected for the project. An example of secondary data would be census data. It's data that's already been collected, surveys have already been done, and this data is available for somebody else like you to use. Census data is actually a great source of information for you and your projects. It would contain data such as household income data, household size, educational attainment, population demographic data in terms of percentage ethnicity or male, female. You can look at the data down to a county or zip code. So I encourage all of you and all of your teams to review the census data, because this data should be used in your projects, specifically as you look to identify your target market and try to create a demographic profile of your potential target market. And again, this would be considered secondary data. Primary data would be you actually collecting the data on your own because it doesn't exist yet. So you would implement surveys, you would do interviews, you would do experiments. Types of marketing information. Again, as we look at data, which are the facts and figures pertinent to the project, you could be collecting secondary or primary data. Primary data is data that has not been collected yet, so you would go ahead and observe or use questionnaires and surveys or do interviews. And you can look at some examples here in either case. Secondary already exists, so you could look at it in terms of internal data that's already been collected inside a company, or external data such as U.S. Census data, trade association studies, business periodicals, and the like. Collecting relevant data in terms of secondary data, there's two types of internal data inside the company. One would be inputs, such as budgets, financial statements, sales call reports, and there's been effort expended to make sales. Outcomes, actual sales and customer communications, and these would be results of marketing efforts to date. Other types of external data outside the firm are U.S. Census reports that I've talked about before, trade association studies, business periodicals, internet-based reports. Examples of U.S. Census Bureau reports, the 2010 census, and of course the 2020 census is going on right now. There's also the American Community Survey, which includes data that's collected on a yearly basis, and you also have the 2017 economic census. So I encourage you to go visit the census website at census.gov and explore the data that's there. External data also includes some syndicated panels such as Nielsen TV ratings or J.D. Power surveys or IRI InfoScan. You can check these out on your own too. J.D. Power you might be familiar with in terms of auto ratings and rankings. External data also includes information from trade associations, universities, and business periodicals. Online databases and internet resources for marketers are listed here. For news and articles, sources such as LexisNexis, CNBC, Wall Street Journal, Fox Business. Statistical and financial data, FedStats, Census Bureau. Portals, search engines, USA.gov, and of course Google. And Google also has a Google Scholar aspect as well you can search. In collecting relevant data, secondary data, advantages for secondary data would include time savings because the data has already been collected and it tends to be inexpensive. Disadvantages is it could be out of date. You're dealing with data that's been collected in a specific period of time. Also, definitions and categories may not be right for what you're trying to uncover. It may not be specific enough. For primary data, in terms of observational or watching people, for example, maybe you want to do some research where you want to understand consumer behavior, so you would go and observe how people interact in a store. As soon as they walk into a store, whether it be a grocery store or retailer store, other type of retailer, what direction do they go in first? What places do they visit? How do they interact with products? How do they interact with the salespeople? So as you look at observational data, these are facts and figures obtained by watching, either mechanically or in person, how people actually behave. So this can be done, again, for observational methods that exist. There's also Nielsen's People Meter, Nielsen's TV ratings. But of course, this is something that you can do on your own. You can go observe how a business is working or people, how they interact with your business. Nielsen Broadcast Ranking Report, an example for a TV network. Personal methods also include, for observations, mystery shopper. Maybe you're familiar with that, as somebody is hired to go in and see how their store reacts or interacts with customers. Observations, ethnographic research. There's also questionnaire data in terms of primary data. And these are facts and figures obtained by asking people about their attitudes, awareness, intentions, and behaviors. Idea generation methods also include coming up with ideas and holding focus groups, which are formal sessions of customers who are asked for opinions. Other idea evaluation methods include testing an idea using personal interview surveys, telephone interviews, mail surveys, online surveys. Perhaps you've experienced a survey after buying a product or a service. You're being asked for your experience. Primary data question formats. There are open-ended questions. There's closed-end or fixed alternative questions, dichotomous questions, semantic differential questions, and Likert scale questions. So some examples. These are different types of questions in a sample Wendy's survey. This is a sample Wendy's survey, an open-ended question, a dichotomous question. Here's a multiple choice question. Here's a attitudinal question example, and a semantic differential scale question example. Different types of questions in a sample Wendy's survey. Again, it depends on what type of information you're trying to collect, but this would be an example of trying to collect primary data. Here's a Likert scale question. A media behavior question example. Usage behavior question example. And here's an example of demographic questions, which may include questions about gender, marital status, ages, income. So other sources for primary data include social media. How have people been commenting on a particular platform? Some data can be readily accessible if it's public. Now, one of the assignments you had for this week is looking at a Carmex case. So you look at how Carmex uses social media programs. Other primary data sources, panels. Consumers could participate on a panel. You can also do experiments where you have independent and dependent variables. These would, again, take more time, take more effort, and the more you go into some things like this, it gets a little bit more expensive. Advantages of primary data tends to be more flexible, more specific to the problem, because again, it's information that you are collecting for your needs. Disadvantages, it can be expensive and very time consuming to collect. And develop the findings and analyzing the data. This is where we talk about data analytics, and this has become a very popular area of business these days. You can actually get a degree in data analytics. You look at how companies transform data into useful information, the idea of data-based decision making. So as companies collect data, how do they use it, how do they visualize it, and how can they use it for better decision making within the firm, or to create different offerings. A diagram that represents how marketing researchers and managers can use information technology to turn information into action. In terms of making responsible decisions, again, some downsides of data mining and predictive modeling. Sophisticated data mining reveals personal information, so you're getting into privacy issues. And there's a lot of information and data collected via cookies and apps. So again, some of this gets into privacy issues as well. An example of marketing dashboards that can be used by marketing managers to present findings that are specific for the marketing manager of the business. Depends on what data is important to that manager. In taking marketing actions, again, based on your findings, based on the data that's been collected and how it's been analyzed, now you're going to make recommendations based on that and implement the action recommendations ideally. After you've implemented something or gone forth with a strategy, you want to evaluate the results. Did it work or did it not work? Was it successful or was it not successful?